Good afternoon. Before we start, I want to talk about a child abduction that is about 2 minutes old. It's a child abduction in Midlothian, Texas, which is about 40 miles from me. Victims are a 12-year-old white female, Jada Welch, and a 7-month-old white male, Tristan Welch. Suspects are Athena Tyson and Scott Welch, a white female and male who have absconded with the children. If you have any information, call the Midlothian Police, Ellis County Sheriff's Department, or 911 with information if you're in that area. Again, there's been a child abductions out of Midlothian, Texas. 2 children. Victims are 12 years old. Hold on. Victims are 12-year-old white female Jada Welch and 7-month-old white male Tristan Welch. Suspects are Alethea Tyson and Scott Welch, a white female and male who have absconded with the children. If you have any information, please call the Midlothian Police and or the Ellis County Sheriff. If you live in the area, please call 911. Homegirl, thank you so much for becoming a new member on this channel. Baby, you know it means the word to me. Now, we also had one out of Livingston, Texas, which is about 2 hours and 50 minutes away from me. Midlothian is not far. So prayers to those children. Yeah, that's the second Amber Alert we've had in the DFW in the last 24 hours, actually last 16 hours, I guess, crimes. So, secondly, I want to ask that everyone tonight, if you are available, please, I need you to go to Skilo's tonight. Skilo is having her first proper live stream tonight, and the title of it is Don't Talk to Cops, right? Thank you, Lenny Beans. You don't have to talk to cops unless it's a speeding ticket or a parking ticket. But there's nothing wrong with not talking to the cops. So that will be going down tonight at 9 p.m. Please, we need all of you to be there. This. Can someone please drop Skilo's link, please? Yes, little Dev. Prayers for all the children. That is something that really all of us need to be aware of, is our rights when it comes to talking to the police. It'd be beneficial for everyone. If you're not subscribed to the beautiful, wonderful Miss Skilo, I need you to hit this link that's going to pop up. One of the moderators here, when they get here, doesn't seem like we have any moderate. Well, I can't see if we've got moderators in here. So anyhow, hey, Cotton Candy, how's everyone doing? Yeah, I love Skilo too. That is a topic that's near and dear to my heart for many reasons. But everyone ought to be aware of their rights when it comes to answering questions to police. So let me see. Hold on. Actually, here's the link right here. I apologize. So give me a moment here. All right. Give me a moment here. Oh, Crimes got it. You're so awesome, Crimes. There you go. Right. Oh, and you're a moderator, so I'm not even good in my own chat. Look at there. Okay, so Fizzle is going to join us here momentarily. Until then, what we're going to be talking about is change in routine or routinely changing. Okay. So basically, hello, Crypt Keepers. What we're going to talk about today is sort of, I guess, what one could consider a nuance, right? We're all looking for this new startling, bat symbol spotlight clue in the in the Summer Wells situation, the unfortunate Summer Wells situation. And I'm here to tell you that you don't have to look for those things necessarily. You can find the nuances, right? So don't really have a lot to preface the video, so I'm kind of trying to stall until Fizzle gets here. Fizzle's feeding her mouth hole. So let me really quickly just send her the link so as she knows I'm ready, although she's very capable of just going in the back door of the StreamYards all on her own. So I want to talk about today loosely for about the next hour and a half is going to be changes in routine or routinely changing. So quite naturally, the routinely changing is just a play on the words, right? So what we're going to be talking about today is change in routine. Now, I'm going to start off by talking about sort of the correlation to what I've coined with Fizzle in a conversation that I wish we had recorded, because now here we are, we're going to try to recreate the conversation. It was awesome. So you've got this, what you could coin transportational routine changes, right? So typically the routine for Don was his white GMC. Allegedly on the 14th, there was a change in routine, whereas Mr. Wells brought the Subaru to the job site for the 14th, as well as the 15th. So that would be Oreo Pie. Thank you for becoming a new member this afternoon, baby. You know me, the word, Timmy. So you've got the change in routine on 110 with the transportation, right? You've got a change in the routine. Don says, and I quote, I pay $650 a month and it just sits there. I thought I ought to drive it. So he thought on the 14th, that's when that change in routine might start. Carried over, at the 14th, pardon me, carried over to the 15th, and then back on routine, right? Doesn't take the Subaru to the job anymore, right? So you've got this change, this very short-term change in the routine of the transportation. Now, you also had a change in routine on 125 in terms of the transportation as well. Now, what I want to mention is that while we're speaking in terms of the change in routine, there was a change in routine for Andy on the 14th. That's a change in routine that Andy can remember. It is him coming home early, right? He can remember the change in routine, right? Now, what we've been led to believe is the typical routine transportationally for the Bernard Brown clan most of the time was that Andy might drive the truck down the hill where the Soul was parked because the Soul wouldn't make it up the hill, right? So you would have Andy bringing the truck down the hill, changing spots with the Soul in the Tacoma, leaving the Tacoma at the bottom of the hill, taking care of his business at work, coming home, and then using the Tacoma a lot of times routinely to go back up the hill so as to not have to walk. Using it in Fizzle's terms, using the truck as an escalator, right? So you have a routine change for Andy on the 14th. Now, routinely, he works a full day. On the 14th, he worked some portion less than a full day. Can remember that. Now, on the 15th, starting right from the beginning of the day, you had, hey, Fizzle, there she is. How you doing, baby?
Hey.
How you doing?
I got me a pen and paper in case I need to write something down while you're talking so we don't interrupt.
Okay. So I know that I started at a different jump off point than our conversation did, and I'm not really sure why I did. Do you remember exactly where we started? I know it was basically change in routine, right?
You were concerned about the vehicles.
Correct. I am concerned with the vehicles because, let's go there. we'll develop into this part. So if you were to take a random census, and this is, I'm only speaking facts. I'm not picking, I'm not doing anything. So when you're speaking in terms of facts, I mean, not facts, in terms of statements, not going any deeper whether or not the statement is true or not, but just taking a census on the statements. What you have is you have Andy saying he was driving the Soul that day. But when you ask Fred or you ask Jody, they're going to say something different. So when you take a census of it, when you're like Jody, Fred, and Andy, raise your hand and tell us. So you got two people saying, well, Andy was in the truck that day. And you've got one person in Andy saying, well, I was in the Soul that day. Either way, you have a change in routine.
But now this is where I interrupted you on the phone too. I said, but Jody claims that she has Fred trolling, like that they work together. And
correct.
I mean, there's even speculation she put him up to the bones thing.
Correct. So, and that's without any deductions, without any deductive work being done. You're just taking an organic census, and you're going to have allegedly more people with their hand up saying that. And I mean, in fact, Fred went so far as to say that Andy had the truck. He spotted Andy in the truck, and there was a car behind with a young lady. Now, I'm here to not deduce. I don't care who the young. I mean, the person in the car behind could have been someone trying to get around him on their way home. Who knows, right? Mm-hmm. But what you do have is you have a change in the routine. Now, we deduced a little bit what it might have to look like in order for Jody to say that she had the car and for Andy to say that he had the car. Right now, technically, we deduced that if Andy were to drive the truck down the hill, get in the Soul, leaving the truck there, he could technically say he was in both vehicles. He could even technically be spotted in both vehicles in one day, right? But to get back on track, in order to make what Jody alleges by saying she had the Kia, it would have had to have been Andy coming home at some point to swap vehicles, or I don't know how you make this work, but it's like maybe someone theoretically, speculatively, you could have had someone taking Andy to work and then dropping a vehicle off to him later on at some point, right? I'm not saying any of that happened. What I'm saying is that when you deduce who raises their hand saying what vehicle they had allegedly that day, you have to go back and deduce what the actual physical actions would have had to have looked like in order to make that make sense, right? Now, also adding to the flavor, right, that allegedly Kenny had access to the vehicle, or that the vehicle was Kenny's. Whatever the ownership of the vehicle isn't that important to me at this point. It's who could have had access to the vehicle on the 15th. Now, do you have anything to add to this point?
Yeah, and so I remember Andy saying, I don't remember if it was on his stream or whenever he was up over on Adrian's, but I remember Andy saying that he would park the car down at the bottom and he would use the red truck up and down the
escalator
driveway.
Style. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. And I must be, I'd explained, I touched on that, but not, I don't know a lot about that. And that's wherein the routine starts.
But then you also have Don, who when he when he thinks of the red truck, he brings up Kenny. And if it was primarily in Kenny's possession, why was it over on 125 all the time being used as transportation up and down the driveway?
Right. So what you have is the alleged ideal. Yes, sir. You have the alleged ideal and alleged statements that make it seem as if at some point Andy was known to drive the red truck to work. Mm-hmm. Right. So what you have is but that isn't, I guess, the typical, right? So it sounds like the routine is that he drives the truck to the bottom of the hill on the turn where they had adopted a parking spot for the soul. The routine was he would take the truck down and swap the truck out for the soul, take the soul, leaving the truck, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what you have allegedly on the 15th is a change in routine. He says he's in the soul. She says she's in the soul. Meanwhile, Fred is saying that he saw Andy in the truck. Now, you got to also, to step back, on the 14th, there also was a change in routine to some degree that brought Andy home early on the 14th. So you've got both hills having 2 days worth at least. Don't know anything past the 14th, but both.
Didn't he say he was going to be late though?
On the 15th?
Yeah.
Correct.
You said he was early on the 14th, or?
Got home early from work on the 14th, yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, that could be because Dobbs.
Sure, absolutely. And now let's step over onto the Dobbs scenario while we're here. We're going to Tarantino back and forth, but so we kick the Dobbs idea around. Now, the ideal of the Dobbs scenario, which I laid out to Fizzle, is this. When you listen to Jody Sue's contention of who is the aggressor of the men in their lives that are coming towards Andy, she portrays herself as the tough guy. She is Andy's keeper, right? She's the guy that takes care of the physicalities of men that want smoke with Andy, right? So what you have is a complete contradiction of that dynamic on said day, right? So you've got Jody now, and let me paint the picture. She alleges Dobbs is on the property, and that to some extent she's fearful. She's hyper vigilant for Dobbs. So instead of being who she normally is, which is this tough lady who will go fight these men, what she does is call the police on Dobbs. She calls the police on Dobbs when she had her opportunity to do what she says she always does and has threatened. Anyone step toe on here, right?
Is it? Didn't happen. But I thought, was it not Polly that contacted law enforcement about Dobbs?
May have been. But still, the fact remains that she didn't do what she's always threatened, which is take care of business physically if somebody comes on her property.
Yeah.
So the police are dispatched. No matter how they're dispatched, Jody doesn't do her business that she says she always does. She waits until Andy gets there. Now, she may have said in the past, with Dobbs is the most assertive she had seen Andy be with a man. Now, take it or leave it, right? It's what she said. But mind you, we've not ever heard Andy ever talking about his physicalities to that extent, only Jody Sue. So when you see Jody Sue in this situation wherein she could have taken care of things how she says she doesn't, she didn't. Hey, what she does is she waits until he gets home. They get in a vehicle and then they go stalk the man.
Yeah.
Right. And that loosely, that's my terminology. When you're going to find out where someone is, you're stalking them. It's not much different than, trying to hunt a deer or whatever. So
yeah,
stalking go ahead.
From there, I was like, well, there is a reason because in their own words, wanted to make sure he did not come back the next day.
Correct. So there was going to be a lesson taught.
Did Dobbs showing up on the 14th mess something up and wanted to make sure he wasn't going to come back the next day, and they wanted to be sure of it one way or another? And I say they, and that's just a broad.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, who knows who all they could be, right? Correct. It could be Jody Sue and Andy. It could be Jody Sue and Candace, and Dawn and Andy are completely in the dark. Like it is. I am not singling out just Jody Sue or just Andy or just Jody Sue and Andy. Sure. I'm saying they.
Correct. Now, let's sidestep laterally over to, and this is going to kind of logistically look a nightmare if you were writing it down, trying to keep up with notes. So we're going to step sideways with the issue of ownership of the truck on the 15th, right? Now, I heard Tiffany speak on it, and Tiffany and I also had been talking about the scenario, trying to work out, theoretics. So you've got no problem with anyone having an issue with being next to, in, driving, whatever, the truck on any other day, except for now on the 15th, you've got an issue with ownership, right? So you've got this transportational issue. It's a routine change. It represents many things just with its very existence, right? So what you have is one of the things I contend is that if you're comfortable in knowing and believing in all it, like if you're not involved, you don't have an issue driving the truck on the 15th, right? Or having the truck around you on the 15th, whether it be your son driving it or the neighbor driving it or your brother driving it or your fiance, your kid, like whoever. If you know in your heart of hearts that you weren't involved in this situation with this child, you have no problem putting yourself in ownership of that truck on the 15th. There should be no discernible issue with ownership with anyone that has that could potentially take ownership of the vehicle at any given time, whether it be Boogie, whether it be Jody, whether it be Andy, whether it be Kenny. Should be no issue. The truck didn't sit vacant on the 15th, and that's what they all want you to believe. They all are pointing the truck at someone else, right? So you've got the issue with the truck. Now, with the fact that no one wants to take ownership of said truck, that in itself, that statement screams in decibels I guess we can't even hear. Because if I know my car is not the focus of a bank robbery, let's say it's another Honda Civic that looks just like mine, I'm not going to have a problem driving my car on the 15th. If I did, I'm not going to lie about it because I know there will never be evidence to state different that my car was used in a robbery or whatever major felony, right? So there should never be an issue about who's driving the car on the 15th if there is no issue.
Right, there shouldn't be.
Correct. The only time you're going to run into an ownership possession issue is if there is an issue with the vehicle. And that isn't my opinion. That is fucking, look at the way humans work.
Yeah.
No one wants to have the fucking truck on the 15th, pardon my French. No one. They're okay. She'll take pictures in the fucking thing now. No problem. So when you've got an issue with a truck that you should feel comfortable about not being the truck everyone's looking for, if you didn't have the truck in your possession, then quite naturally you ain't worried about it. So if you've got an issue with a make, brand, and year of truck that could or couldn't be associated to you, if you've got everyone that could be in potential possession of that pointing the fingers somewhere else, I think it becomes heavy to lift them out of the idea that the red truck is Jody's or Andy's or Granny's or whoever's, Kenny's, right? If the truck isn't the truck the whole fucking world is looking for, then you shouldn't have a problem with ownership that day. Because there's a problem with ownership of the truck on the day of the 15th, I think you could almost say, allegedly, that's the truck we're looking for. Now, do you have anything to add up to this point?
I know in our conversation, I mentioned that it would be interesting to ask Candace and Dawn in regards to that truck, who do they see drive it? Like, do you see Kenny? Because as soon as it was mentioned, Dawn mentioned Kenny. But then again, it's parked at 125, taking him up and down the driveway. And then, who comes to their mind? Who is most often in that truck? Is there a situation I mean, a lot of people are using that truck.
They are. And so, and now let's touch on the garage sale lady. So we got the garage sale lady, and we believe, when I say we, Fizzle and I, we believe that the very essence of the truck's existence started with the garage sale lady. So,
yeah,
with the existence of the ideal of the truck, what never came with that was a descriptor of the occupant of the truck. We only got the descriptor of the occupant of the truck from the person who adopted the story of the truck. Secondly, Jody wasn't the first person to come out with the story about the truck. So you've got to ask yourself now, all of a sudden, can someone just whip up the existence of another truck because they also have that truck? Now, what you know is that, yes, law enforcement adopted the idea that whoever the person in the truck, alleged truck was, they needed to speak to them. But let me tell you what they didn't do. They did not adopt Jody Sue's descriptors of the occupant of the truck.
Right.
They did
right.
not.
And Jody Sue felt the need to, I guess, back her story up with reaching out to Ronnie Lawson on Facebook and telling him, I'm not being histrionic. I did see the red truck that the other person's saying. Like, and she swears that she's mentioned it since day one. And it wasn't just that lady brought it up, that she's,
Yeah. Now we, and so then we step laterally again, and we move over to New Orleans lady, right? So with what transpired with New Orleans lady is very interesting, because what you had was like the attempt for Jody to maybe tip her toe and do the old switcheroo, right? So let's talk about it. The lady says the Nissan is the most common truck.
Hold on, Benny. Hold on.
Sure.
Hold that thought. All right. So I just didn't want to lose this. So okay. Tiffany says, I think Dawn saying casually to Candace that Kenny was driving says something, because, I mean, I didn't know anyone else was driving it. Did he stay around there sometimes? So that's a good question, because for Dawn to mention Kenny's name, they weren't neighbors. They didn't live on the same road. And when Dawn tried to recall Jody Sue, he couldn't remember her name, but you can remember Kenny's name at the mention of a vehicle.
Correct.
So that's interesting. He couldn't remember her name.
It's ass backwards, right? Like, you remember your neighbor's brother that you would see less theoretically than you would ever see your neighbor.
Correct, like, but they have one thing in common, and both of them participated in the purchasing of street drugs.
Correct. And car parts, allegedly, and tires and shit. I don't know all the dynamics of all their business dealings back and forth, but I could tell you that with what we've seen as the what we've seen of the communications of them in the past, I think it's pretty safe to say Don knew her name. I mean, hell, he'd taken her into town before all of this, on rides and shit. So it does start to get very murky right there.
Or was Dawn being like just playing dumb and couldn't remember her name?
Could be. Very well could be. So the other thing that Fizzle and I did was we took the two couples. We took the Wells Blythe couple and we took the Bernard Brown couple. And what we did is we tried to issue complications or impossibilities. Now, there are many complications between the two, and we'll focus on the impossibilities, seemingly impossibilities first. The first impossibility for the Bernard and Brown clan is that, well, initially, when I hadn't deduced it any further, it was that two cars can't be in one place at the same time. As it developed more, it became more impossible that two vehicles could not be in two different places at the same time. It was an impossibility. So that's problematic. When I think of what could be potential impossibilities for the Wells Bly Hill, it could be, and really the only thing I see as an impossibility is, well, I was only gone for 2 minutes. I feel like deducing, maybe in an urban setting, you turn your back for 2 minutes, your kid's gone. Yeah, maybe, right? It happened in the Walsh case. That's what she alleges. She turned her back for a minute, little boy's gone. They find him 90 miles an hour, 90 miles away, decapitated, right? This situation, I believe. Now, Fizzle, give me your take on how 2 minutes could be feasible.
It's not.
Well, you had mentioned what T had said.
Right.
What T said about 5 o'clock.
Okay, you're right. Thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
That's what I was about. Exactly. I was going to ultimately say the same thing over. So the only way that it would be possible for 2 minutes to be long enough for a child to disappear, be snatched, whatever, would be if somebody knew their routine, knew
Correct.
every single day that at this time, Candace is getting like hammered. And, who better would know the routine of that hill than Jody Sue?
Who's hypervigilant, watching them like
recording them out the window like a freaking crazy person, recording the sounds from the hill. And I mean, she would know. She would absolutely know when is an opportune time. She's been over there enough. She knows. There's just no way. She knew Candace was a drunk.
You're correct. Now, the other impossibility, which it just occurred to me, and it is an impossibility, and I did it on purpose in a way to really just prove a fact. But I guess in reality, it could be feasible. But the initial timeline is concreted as we know, and it maybe some of you remember, some of you don't. In one of the last exposés or segments that I had with Candace, I was able to walk Candace back to 4:30 in the timeline when she disappeared. Now, do I believe she believed that 4:30 was, it was an amicable time to agree on? So she was going to walk it back without ever talking about it and breaking it down online or whatever, never, deducing it, but just walk the thing back to 4:30 so easy like that and agree with me. I believe, in my opinion, that she, I showed her ability to be led or to suggest something to her, and either she just agree with you right off the bat or whatever, right? So that too seemingly could be an alternate impossibility. Now, I'm not here to say that that Summer didn't go missing at 4:30. What I'm saying is that without ever having talked to her about any of that while she was seemingly intoxicated, she walked it back to 4:30, right? So now we have a lot of complications with the Wells, and I think most of the complications that we have seen have a lot to do more with lifestyle, right? More with lifestyle, more with the way that they treat their children, the way they interact with their children. But you get to this point, and I'm going to step laterally again. I hope everyone knows that in an investigation that's open, or even when there's cases that take a long time to play out to their finality, it is absolutely expected that at some point you reach the pinnacle of information. And what that looks like is there is a time, there's a formula, and usually it's like about 6 months they state that there's a period after an offense or a situation, an event, that you will remember things that you couldn't remember when questioned. Then you will organically reach a point, like all of us have. Even the suspects and witnesses will reach a point where it tips and it goes the other way, where they start forgetting details and information. And it's to be expected. Just because you forget information after a time doesn't make you guilty. And just because you start remembering things after a time doesn't make you innocent. Right? So it's it's really strange. And I use the ideal of that sort of pinnacle of it going up and down with remembering and forgetting, how we continue to have this new information in the way that, like, so let's talk about the Nissan with the New Orleans lady. She, in my opinion, walked like that was Jody Sue dipping her toe. New Orleans lady wasn't saying that Nissan is the most popular vehicle in her area, because there's no way Jody could know Nissan is the most popular vehicle in New Orleans. What she's saying is, I agree, New Orleans lady, Nissan is the most popular vehicle where I live at in Tennessee. Absolutely, she said. Categorically, that's all she said. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, am I willing to give Jody Sue the same real estate with saying now Nissan and agreeing with all of this bullshit? Am I willing to give Jody Sue that same real estate that I gave Candace with walking the 430 back? Like, was Jody Sue looking at our chat when she said absolutely and just didn't really realize she's just agreeing with noise, right? Just being agreeable with noise, not necessarily agreeing or trying to switch the make and model now to a Nissan. But we all know Jody Sue, and we know that ain't what it is.
And we also know that deceit thrives in confusion, and what better way to confuse than to throw a whole different time or type of truck out there.
If it's let's say it's Blue Roof Don's wife, if she makes that statement, it doesn't hold water. But if Jody, and that's the thing Jody doesn't understand, that as a suspect, there are things you ought not say, just out of respect for the child, the investigation, the parents, yourself, the investigation. I mean, all of these things, right?
There's a lot of things she ought not be doing, like getting a bloody handprint on her fingernail.
All of those things. She ought not get a bloody fingerprint on her, a handprint on her fingernails after she did what she did, talking about me when I made a piece of art that had nothing to do with Summer Wells. It was a picture of a new mask I got. Had nothing to do with it, but she associated it to Summer Wells, and I'm not a suspect. I'm a correspondent covering it. She is a suspect and does have a little miniature kid handprint of blood on her fingernail, for fuck's sake. Right? So, I mean, I don't know. So now when you back up like from space and you're looking at the two hills and you're looking at the information that you have for both hills in real time, simultaneously, you're going to see, I mean, I'm not stretching my opinion. I'm not planting an opinion in fizzle. There's more complication on the Bernard Brown side than there is on the Wells side. And if we reach this place, I say to Fizzle, bro, what happens if we get to the end of this thing and we find out Don and Candace didn't have anything to do with it? And that we are all clouded, because I think every single person here today can agree that there's been times in your life you've looked at something incorrectly and swore you would scream to the heavens that you were right. I mean, just because they're neglectful, just because they're POSs, just because they smoke crack and visit sex workers, what that does do is cloud your judgment of these people, but it doesn't actually make them guilty of abducting their own child or having something to do with the disappearance of their child. Hooah. Right. So, yeah. So when you're doing the pros and cons, and I never really, and I think that's something you really need to focus on, is the issues that were going on between the two hills on the same 2 days, 14th and 15th. Now, if you back it up, we do have a little context about, what is it, the 12th or the 11th? But of course, that comes from Jody Sue and the talk of the sedatives. So we know we know there was these we know there are these contradictions and these complications and seemingly impossibilities on the Bernard Brown side of the holler. And we also add to the fact that on the night of the 14th, Jody Sue and Andy were up on the 110 side. They admitted to it. They said it. They were there. So they meet
Jody Sue
in the middle.
puts him there. Jody Sue puts him there the night before, so the 14th, and her there the day prior. She was there the day prior, she says.
So
that's when she claims to have seen Dawn and Summer in the shower, but that's not at all possible.
Correct. Physically, with the way the house is laid out, she could not see where she was at unless she threw her eyeballs in a curveball and they came back to her like a boomerang. Couldn't have happened.
Right.
Now, what you said is that she could have seen them once they walked away from the bathroom towards the front door of the mudroom. She could have seen something there, but you cannot physically see the bathroom from the front door where she
Benny, I haven't been there, but from what I look at on the map, it doesn't look like if I was to, you would have to be standing directly in front of that door to see them walk away from the bathroom. Now, what Andy says is Summer came to ask for a towel or something. That,
correct.
Something like that. Didn't say that he saw them in the shower together. It's just that they were showering. She asked for a towel.
Correct. And with, lacking more context, it really kind of, no pun intended, it sort of just fizzles and it just like, okay, whatever. So what I'm still stuck on is the transportational confliction, the contradiction with the transports, and why there is one for that day. It's like it's not what they say, it's how they behave around it, right?
Did you also mention the transportation change with 110?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Suddenly out of nowhere on the 14th, you've got a transportation change. You got a transportation change on the 15th as well. So you've got both hills seemingly making some transportation routine changes. Okay. Now I don't know what that entails, but when you physically go through it, Jody Sue says she has the key of soul. What that means is that when Andy came down the hill in the truck, he didn't stop and switch cars. He went to work in the truck, which means that if you're to believe anything Fred Hill says, he sees Andy on the road later that afternoon in the truck with a car behind him with a young lady.
Andy said Jody Sue could have been there on the 15th as well. Why would he place her there? I would assume because it might be just a common thing that they go over there together. Jody Sue likes to pretend like she didn't frequent over there, and that might be true that he was over there more. But for him to say that she might have been over there tells me that it's highly possible.
Well, I feel like what he's saying is like, and I'm going to give him some real estate on this one because I feel just a little differently. I feel that what he was really saying is like, well, they're not enemies. So in terms of possibilities, like she could have been there. Like he wasn't saying she was there, but what he's saying is out of all the places in the world she might go while I'm at work, she might go to the wells. That's how I interpreted it. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good interpretation too. Do you think that Andy knew how much Jody Sue hated them? He's pretty dismissive. Strange. Whenever she bitches and moans and complains, he's always like, I love you. What do you want for dinner? Can I have the grocery list? Like,
now, this is the thing. At knowing, how a man works, because I'm a man, when you got a nagging situation, men can turn into children really quick in the way, in the mind state, man, probably any other way, but turn into a child in the sense that when they're nagging, you just shut off and you're doing that. Yeah, I love you, babe. I hear you, but you're not actually retaining any of that stuff. So she may be telling him the fever on the Facebook lives, but because that's not interesting to him, He's hearing it, but he's not retaining it. And because he didn't retain it, he can't reproduce it in a statement, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he can theorize, but he doesn't know because, you know, I mean, I'm just saying it's a relative option for why he may have been present for something, but didn't retain the knowledge so that he can't spout it back. But so going a little deeper in the nuance of the routine change, what you have is you had, and this is an interesting dynamic. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't make anyone guilty, doesn't make anything X, Y, or Z. I'm just pointing it out that there is a routine change for Andy on the 14th, right? There's a routine change, and what the output of the routine change is that he went home early. And because there was a breach in the routine, it stands out and he remembers it. So then you move to the 15th, and now all of a sudden he don't remember what he's driving. Well, that also would mean that when you started that morning, there was a routine change. Because if the routine is you bring the truck down the hill and you take the soul to work, that's the routine. So now, if he can't remember if he was in the truck or the car, something happened, in my opinion, something happened from the time he went to bed to the time he woke up and the time he decided to take a vehicle and which vehicle he was going to take. Now, he very well may have stuck with his routine and took the soul, but he can't remember. So the fact that he can't remember constitutes and is representative of a change in routine. Now, on the 15th, he can't remember the changes in routine. On the 14th, he can.
Right,
So
and
I don't know what the dynamic is.
You know,
Right?
it seems to me, and I've never been in a situation like this, but it seems to me that if you've had some sort of earth-shattering disruption in your life, like, you know, becoming a suspect in a missing child's case, you would probably remember almost every detail, especially what vehicle you're driving. I would probably even remember what I was wearing, you know? And Andy says he doesn't typically remember things that aren't pertinent to his day-to-day life or his well-being or whatever. He only retains information that is relevant to him.
I agree. But now what you have is you have a situation that clearly is not routine. Because if it were routine, he would know exactly what he was driving. Now, I'm also willing to give Andy all kinds of real estate, understanding that he may have some cognitive issues with remembering things, his memory. I understand.
Yeah.
He may have been fed shit over this period of time by YouTubers, by Jody Sue for sure, right? His son, his daughter. He's been fed all kinds of shit. So if he doesn't actually remember, what I start to lean back towards is that it was routine, right? If he doesn't remember, so yes, the disappearance of Summer Wells is not specific to him. It does not, in its regular existence, is not impactful to him. Other than, man, that sucks. The neighbor's kid's missing, right? It's not impactful to him. So because it's not impactful and it did not change the course of his day, he never knew. We know he said he found out the child was missing by somebody in the front towards Beach Creek and Ben Hill. And by the time he got towards where Jody Sue is, when he pulled up to her, he says, I know. He already knew. She never told him. Not even when she's saying, are you going to pick me up? Right? So what you have is a scenario where I start to lean back towards maybe the routine change for Andy on the 14th isn't no super duper Inspector Gadget, you know, just maybe they were slow at work. They sent him home early. And then it's seemingly because he can't remember what he's driven. And I think that's because He'd been fed all this different shit. For me, for Andy not to remember what vehicle he's in, to me suggests there actually was not a routine change for Andy. He was just told there was. And so now, because he has issues with his memory, he's questioning himself.
Yeah.
He's like, well, now I don't know. Maybe even if the police told him, because my contention is this. The very first time they met with the police, or he met with the police or the FBI or CARD or whoever he met with, they said, what'd you drive today? Or what'd you drive that day? If he didn't remember, they may not have known in that interview before talking with him what he was driving. But as soon as he says he doesn't know, them agents find out immediately what he was driving. And the next time they interview him, he knows what he's driving. So that when he comes to the internet 1 year later, 13 months later, 14 months later, he actually does know what he was driving because he's been told by the police.
Yeah, we talked about this the other day. I was like, at the very least, I would expect him to say, well, I don't actually remember, but
Correct.
law enforcement has told me I drove whatever vehicle.
That's to me. Now, again, I'm not in this situation, but as an outsider looking in, when you're trying to relay the fact, and I'm not saying Andy is guilty of anything, and I'm not banging Andy up. We're only kicking around the can of fact and truth. These are things they've
right,
said.
and nobody should have to tiptoe around questioning people or circumstances whenever there is a missing child. Like, Summer's not found, and everybody should be asking all the questions about all the people all the time until she is found. Like, this isn't about anybody's feelings.
Correct. Now, the other thing, and I know it's sort of, it's metaphorical, but in a sense, not in a sense, it's metaphorical and it's real life. Where's the best place sometimes to hide something, Fizzle?
What do you mean? Where's the best place to hide something? In plain sight.
In plain sight. You might even take selfies in the fucking truck that everyone's looking for. If you're narcissistic in that way, you might allegedly be in possession of the vehicle at any given time, except for on the day when being in possession of said vehicle would put you in the grease.
And you know what, Benny? I feel like Jody Sue getting that Xterra, the yellow one, the other suspicious vehicle in this whole situation, was kind of like a haha, there's two. And it's like, you could have bought any other beater on that lot and you pick that one. Like, it's kind of like I'm smarter than you. There's two vehicles that I drive or have possession of that are suspicious in this case, and y'all still can't figure it out. Bait plates and whatnot. Yeah, she wanted the Kia Soul plates to be on the Xterra or bait plates.
And we talked about that, right? We're like, and what the fuck is a bait plate? There's not even like an urban dictionary. I mean, I've never even looked, but I just know. No, I never did. I just know there is no such terminology as a bait plate. There is a terminology called a bait car. And what that is a car that they leave unlocked in high crime areas where there's a lot of auto theft in hopes someone gets in the car. Then they can shut the car down, lock them in the car, and they take them to jail. Bait plate equals going to jail because you are too fucking lazy or you can't legally register a car in your name. And so what you need is just a random plate on the back of the car so you ain't driving around with nothing, with just paint showing, right? There's no such thing as a bait plate. There is no such fucking thing.
And why would you want to bait people to look at you anyway? A bait plate on a bait vehicle that might look like
you don't want to be
Dudley's. Like, why? Why? You are trolling the situation, and it's the narcissism in her. She's smarter than everybody.
Can we all agree? I mean, let's all agree on this dynamic really quick. And I'm not force feeding or planting no bullshit in nobody's head. I don't know.
But if you don't agree, get the fuck out of here. No, just kidding.
Yeah, if you don't agree, unsub now. No, I'm just kidding. The other night, she opened the panel. It's a change in routine. Okay. Something motivated the output. Now, the output is the behavior, right? Something happens and you react, and your reaction is the output. So there was an input, a situation that was it was situationally inputting in her life. There's an input, she reacts, there's an output. The output is celebratory. Can we agree that what we saw the other night was celebratory? Now, I don't know what she's celebrating, because someone as shallow as Jody, she could celebrate the win of a parking ticket or a protection order or
I feel
or
like
better.
I have an idea of what she was celebrating, but I don't think we're supposed to say.
Okay. So
But I think
whatever the case is, I think I do too. And I didn't know then. I was reacting, and you saw my output and the side of my ass a lot of times. So um, that was my output, right? Her and you got Jody Poo input and Benny's butt output, right? So, but you cannot stray away from the fact that there would be no issue. Now, if anything, if the vehicle, and this is the other side, it's an optional way it could go, is that if your car or truck rather isn't involved in a situation, then you might accidentally say you were driving that car, right? If that fucking Tacoma had nothing to do with it and you're not sure what you said, which I mean, you might as easily say you were in the truck as the Kia, not leaning towards one more than the other, maybe because the other one, it's representative of a vehicle everyone wants to talk to. In fact, there may have or may not have been at one point $50,000 stipulated to talk to whomever was in that truck. So where are we at, right? Like now, I'm also willing to give Jody Stool, and this is really loose, like 10%. I give her 10% that she's not guilty of anything, and that she would lie about anything even if she wasn't involved in it.
I agree with you on any. Okay, so I'm not even 10% that she's not involved at all, but I do agree with the idea that even if Jody Sue's not involved in something, she will absolutely fabricate her way into a situation just so she can run her fucking mouth.
So now, and therein lies the issue, right? So in her normal social media practices with her Facebooking, for the most part, she's dealing with people that are all local to her. So there is going to be a different level of acceptance, right? Like if you're local and you're watching Jody Sue on Facebook Live, you know, chances are like she knows where you live, XYZ. Maybe you've had a problem with her before, you're just lurking. But then when you open it up to the YouTube, the dynamic of the YouTube is now there's more people watching you that aren't from where you are, and you can't be that same geographical bully that you can be on Facebook Live with all followers from your area right there, right? So maybe maybe this profile ventures into the YouTube and then is so narcissistic that she can't get away because every day somebody throws something at her and it attaches to her and dents her ego. She has to come back and discuss it, right? She doesn't have the ability, and this is if she's not involved and she's just lied and interjected. Now it looks like she's involved because her ego won't let her leave it alone, right? Now, she made a statement the other night. She said, I don't care if I'm considered a suspect to the day I burn in hell.
Yeah.
Well, you got to know, Jody, and this is for you, Jody. You got to know that's the wrong shit to say, Jody, because if you're a suspect to the day you die, that means you're either not saying something that could clear you or have said something that can't clear you. And every fucking day of your existence, you should be trying to clear yourself, because when you clear yourself, you are helping Summer Moon Utah Wells. Know that shit, Jody. So don't sit there and say you're just gonna collect it and hold on to it until the day you burn in hell, bitch. Be fucking helpful. Go clear yourself, Jody. I'm guessing. I mean, I'm not guessing. It's clear. You can't clear yourself.
Yeah.
You're incapable of saying whatever it is to say to clear yourself, Jody. And so what does that make you, Jody? It makes you more than just a lying observer that interjected yourself into a situation that you had nothing to do with. You're starting to look like the one, Jody.
She is. That's exactly what I said. I was like, this is starting to look like, I don't even remember how exactly I worded it, but like, this is looking worse and worse for Jody Sue.
Yeah, you're looking like the one. And I'm going to tell you what.
Oh, I said she was looking good for it.
There's no issue available for us to look at involving transportational situations with the wells. Now, does it seem fishy? There's a transportational routine change for the wells on the 14th. It does, in light of all this other stuff. But that in itself doesn't make him good for anything. But in my opinion, when you look at the transportational issues on 125, weigh them against the transportational contradictions on 110, and they seemingly tip the scale on 125. Right now, this is the thing. Transportational and routine situation changes, they don't hold any water if you're your own separate entity and you're not involved, or you don't logistically live next to or inject yourself into a missing child case. If you decide to take this car that day and you don't remember, it don't fucking matter to nobody. But as soon as the car, I mean, you guys, you get it. As soon as you can't remember in the car, they say they want to put you in as the same color and same year and make and model and all the other shit. And then you got a fucking neighbor saying, hey, they used to have a ladder rack on that motherfucker. Well, let me tell you what. I guess we can get right down to the bottom of it. We can find out if there was ever a ladder rack on there within reason. We have an avenue to be able to do that. Now, can the person that could know this information actually answer it? Did they ever pay attention? Do they know? Right? Somebody out there knows.
Okay, so I wrote this down, and this is a good place to ask it. Dawn and Candace would know, or at least Candace, because Candace was in and out before Andy ever got home that day. Was the Soul parked on the road?
It would have had to have been, because it won't go up the hill.
She never mentioned it. She mentioned seeing a blue van.
Correct.
She never mentioned seeing.
Now, let's talk really quick about this delivery driver. Got a delivery driver or someone that is that is charged with being in that area routinely for their job. What has Scott H said from the beginning, Fizzle?
That they'll all cover for each other always.
They'll all cover for each other anyways.
They'll never tell on each other.
So really all you need, now this is the thing,
not even law enforcement. Law enforcement won't even. Yeah.
Every motherfucker involved in this, no matter how they were involved, they've been found out, haven't they?
Yeah.
ASPCA, I mean, everybody been found out. We still don't know who this delivery driver is that said they saw the red truck.
Yeah.
We don't know. This delivery driver, the only thing that makes it not Jody Sue's truck is a fucking ladder rack. It's the only thing. When Jody Sue talks about seeing a dark-skinned man with tattoos inches away from her on her driveway every day for 2 fucking weeks, does she ever mention a ladder rack?
No.
She does not ever mention a fucking ladder rack. She also does not ever mention any buckets in the back either. So all you got to have is somebody, and this is speculative and theoretic, all you got to have is somebody that'll stick up for you and say, yeah, I seen one that had a fucking ladder rack on it. Now, you're not looking at the vehicle on 110 no more. You're looking at a vehicle from somewhere else, right? You didn't even get any context on, well, does the vehicle have a fucking Tennessee license plate on it, right? You don't have any of that. Jody Sue herself never put the ladder rack on the truck for 2 whole weeks looking at this guy and his tattoos. She sees his tattoos and can describe them. Refuses to, but never puts a fucking ladder rack on that truck. Never.
You know what? And she's full of shit anyway, because if she would have seen that truck go by that many times and she was that close, as big of a mouth as that bitch has, she would be like, "What are you doing, bro? What are you doing
Well, see,
down here?"
that also negates what she says when she says she's so forceful and she handles all the problems. Yeah, what that says is, you mean to tell me you see the same truck 14 days in a row, inches from you, ain't got no business there, and you ain't said shit to him? That's not what you paint yourself out to be. So either you're a liar and you're not actually as tough as you are. And I'll be willing to say that a lot of people on the internet say they're really fucking tough. And then when there's a situation on their property that causes them to be really fucking tough, they're not. I get that. But she said this over and over and over. Now we have we could paint you two scenarios where there were men around that she didn't do what she said she usually does. And that's Jackie Dobbs and the man in the truck. Point blank. Point fucking blank. But the first thing you do, Jody, is you build yourself a Willy Wonka time machine. You go back in time, and when you tell us about this man driving by you every day for 2 weeks, inches away, you got to put a fucking ladder rack on the truck, baby. Got to put that ladder rack on it. Got to. Because we're not just going to assume for you, because you saw this truck every day for 2 weeks and he don't have no business there, we don't assumptuously put a fucking ladder rack on that truck. That ain't what we're doing, Jody. And I'm not going to presumptuously put a ladder rack on your truck either. I don't have to. I don't believe there was a fucking ladder rack ever, people. Because look at the way Jody and Andy are acting about the red truck they won't take ownership of. That shows you all you need to fucking see about a red truck. Fuck the ladder rack. You don't have nobody else putting a ladder rack on the motherfucker except for a delivery driver we've never seen or heard of. Never been vetted, never been doxxed. Nothing. Nothing. So I think a ladder rack is the red herring. A red herring. Of course. I mean, shit. If you got a fucking... Listen, it'd be no different than putting a spoiler on my car or not. If you say, no, it was a Honda Civic, it didn't have a spoiler. Well, my car has a spoiler on it. So it wasn't my car. But somebody could just take the spoiler off in the story and say, oh, yeah, it's I'm telling you, it was a Honda Civic with no spoiler. Well, then you're not looking for the one that got spoilers on it. You're looking right past it. And let me tell you what, if you got a red truck and it's involved and it don't have a ladder rack on it, you can hide it in plain fucking sight. You can hide it right across the hill. That's what you can do with it. Now, you get this bullshit from people that say, oh, it's real convenient. Kenny may have had something to do with that fucking truck anytime around that time, because that man is now worm dirt. So that's very convenient, right? Very convenient. And I'm guessing if I know Jody, like I think I know Jody, if the pressure gets too hot, you know what this bitch will do? She'll tell on her brother. You watch. She'll try to probably create some sort of scenario and put this scenario on her dead brother. You watch. You watch. I mean, that could be the play already, theoretically, allegedly. She may already set this thing up to when they catch on to the wick and they set it on fire, it leads right back to her brother. But it won't matter because he's already dead. Jody, you fucked up the other night, sweetie. You fucked up. And I would tell you, the best thing for us is you do some more panels like that. Worst thing for you is to ever come back to the YouTube, baby. I'm telling you, it's probably time to call it quits because you done really fucked up. And let me tell you what, Jody, we live in this phenomenal fucking society these days. We live in a phenomenal fucking society. Ask Skilo and ask the Georgia Innocence Project and ask the Illinois Innocence Project. Ask any fucking Innocence Project, Jody. You'll fuck around and get locked up for some shit you said. You get locked up for admitting to doing some shit you didn't do. Baby, you finna I feel like you could walk yourself into some shit you can't verbally walk yourself back out of. And because there may not actually be any circumstantial evidence, you could sit in jail forever for some shit you didn't do, Jody. And you think it's a fucking myth? Look on. There would be no such thing as the fucking Innocence Project if it didn't happen. Stupid.
Yeah.
You need to be very fucking careful, Jody. Very fucking careful. You have anything to add?
Before we get too buried in them, I would like to go through starred comments. There's some really good ones.
Let's do it. I almost pissed myself off. Ooh.
I know, I can hear it. Let's just
See, I'm almost fucking hot right now, bro.
I know.
Like,
I can hear
it's just
it.
like this is now, let me tell you, this isn't no brand new information, nobody. It's just a brand new deductive session with all of the things refreshed, right? We hit the refresh button. Now, the routine changes. That's the nuance we're paying attention to. Routine changes are things people do preemptively before something or post offense, right?
Yeah, Benny, there. Yes. There is. So
Post offense.
there is always a change in a routine right before domestic homicide.
For sure.
Did you know that?
Always.
Did you know that?
I did know that. Always. And it could be the smallest nuance. Like, maybe usually he locks the door and puts the alarm on. Maybe this time he just put the alarm on and didn't lock the door.
Or dinner was at 7:15 whenever it's always at 7.
There you go. Right. So you've got and what you have is, when you look in terms of the Wells, now it's bad decisions from Donald Wells and the drinking that has led to the split in his family in terms of the units, Don and Candace, right? Summer is what it is, and the boys, we're not talking about that. We're talking about what split up Don and Candace, and that's Don's DUI offense, right? It's got him currently locked up where he's at, all that mess, right? So the Wells didn't change no hair colors. They didn't take no fucking trips. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. Jody, however, as soon, I can't say as soon, but she knew the child was missing. And when she's texting Andy about, is he going to pick her up or not? That starts to mimic, to me, a mini geographical change. The child is missing. He doesn't know. He's asking, what am I doing? And she says, picking me up, ?
Yes, I was just about to say, Benny, we didn't bring that up. Pull up your timeline.
Right there. Right. So there you got it. Right. So if we know what we know at 6:02, it's already going down, baby.
Yeah.
Right. At 6:02, he's saying, about to leave. What am I doing? She answers right back at 6:02. Getting me, ? or not. 6:02, he's hitting her right back again. That's 3 texts in 1 minute. Want me
Which
to? ?
That's not typically how they text.
It's not how they text. They are stacked on top of each other. 6:02, you've got 3 texts in 1 minute. 6:05, look at it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 texts stacked on top of each other. Now,
Benny,
at 6:05.
Also, even though we know Summer went missing well before 10 minutes before she called police.
Correct.
The thing is, they didn't call police until after 6, closer to 6:30.
Correct.
And it's just so convenient that Jody Sue is stacking on these text messages right before, whenever.
Both of them.
Yes. Well,
now,
yeah.
I know what they'll say is their defense already, and this is what they'll say, Fizzle. They'll say that they were texting like that because he was getting ready to go out of service and they're just really trying to get their communications in. I know that's what she's going to say, but that's bullshit. That's bullshit.
Wait, it's bullshit because, we know when, we don't know when Summer went missing, but we know that it was before 6.
Correct.
Okay, because she called Dawn at 5:30. So she calls law enforcement, but right before she's calling law enforcement, she's talking to Andy, trying to maintain an appearance of normalcy and undisturbed routine. when the only purpose that serves is to maintain plausible deniability.
Correct. And we spoke on this. So we all know Andy's a pothead. I'm a pothead too. When I worked every day, let me tell you what I did. I either got up early enough that I could smoke before I got in the car, or I'd roll one and smoke on the way. Now, I usually would have at least two with me, right? I might smoke half at lunch and then smoke the other half on the way home, or I might smoke all of one at lunch if there was more people and then smoke one on the way home. But what you also never saw was her warning Andy, like, hey, if you've got any weed on you, don't bring it to the house. This fucking place is surrounded with cops, or will be surrounded with cops.
But there's no mention, none. And she already knew at this point, yet she's still saying, coming to get me. Benny, that only serves the purpose of plausible deniability. I'm telling you. If she already knew that Summer was missing by this point, you're not going to say coming or getting me or not. Like, no, you're going to say, never mind. I'm not doing my Facebook Live today. We're not eating fucking KFC. Like, my Starbucks can wait until tomorrow.
There's a kid gone over here.
Exactly. But there's no mention of it at all. And there's these stacked texts right before they finally called the cops. Stacked text. But before that, very far and few in between. And I've said it before that these texts that she's sending are conveniently around very suspicious times.
I agree. I mean, I feel, and I know that I've seen a lot of people commenting, and they're like, Benny seems reinvigorated. Benny seems like, he's been recharged. And I feel like I have over the past 10 days, but now I might sit at home a lot of days in the past month and try to not think about Summerwell stuff. And it's with the ideals and the changes of the routines that really have me looking in these directions now, where you're like, wait a minute. And then you start, comparatively looking at the hills during the same, let's say 48-hour period or 24-hour period, from the 14th, the morning of the 14th to the night of the 15th. Let's comparatively look at all the behaviors we know we can observe. Now, that's all, again, that's all speculative, because we're getting all of this information via people that may have a motive to lie to us. Now, let's laterally step to this, Fizzle, because I know we talked about this as well. Thank you, Crimes.
She absolutely... She did have his phones on multiple occasions. She also had other devices, and they also was doing all of this communication through Facebook Messenger. And she did have access to his Facebook. And at one point he was locked out because of her. But when he sees this correspondence, he never denies it. He never denies this correspondence
as actually, being legitimate. Like, he's not saying, oh, this is it. No, this is all. No, he's like, yeah, that's what it is. Like, you can't deny it. It came straight from their phones.
He doesn't even say, I don't remember saying that to her,
Correct. Now, you have issues in the Wells home. We know that. There's DV, there's drinking, there's drugs, but there's this other dynamic seemingly where Candace knows that Don visits other ladies, has visited other ladies, even visited them in the house while she's there passed out. And seemingly Don knows that she may or may not have had some relations even with allegedly Blue Roof Don's son. Mm-hmm. So that there is some toxicity in the Wells home. We've all fucking seen it, but it's not the same dynamic. There isn't the same dynamic of jealousy between the Wells that there are with, now there is some jealousy, don't get me wrong, but not the same ferocity, not the same at all. Like I feel like Jody could be propelled to be the type of woman that would physically hurt someone if she could. I feel like probably Jody has dreamt about doing something to Coleslaw. Meanwhile, Candace doesn't have those same feelings when she knows Don cheats. She's just like, man, fuck that dude. She doesn't get aggressive and violent about it, right? Jody, however, yes, she is an aggressive, violent lady.
Benny, I want to touch on something before it runs away in chat. So, I started. Let me see. It was something. I think it was crimes where she asked. Can you go to the starred comments and I think it might have been Andy or I don't know.
Rebecca, thank you for your contribution, Queen. It means the world to us, baby. Both of them.
It should be the last one that I starred. Okay, yes, that one, Kimberly. If there's nothing to hide, why not turn over the cameras Jody Sue had on her property? It could clear her, but makes me think guilty. And then Tiffany said maybe there wasn't a search warrant. Okay, so in Discord, I have her in her own words saying that before it even got dark and before the helicopter started flying over, that all of her camera stuff was already turned over to law enforcement. Now
she said she had it ready before the cops got there, is what she said.
Yes. And so either she handed them SD cards or she's full of shit.
SD cards or maybe a DVR recorder box that came with it. I mean, something. You're right. But I'm leaning towards bullshit. Now,
I wanted to make sure it was put out there that she alleges she had given her camera footage to law enforcement. So
correct. But then you've got these other issues with the cameras and statements that Bernard has made in relation to the cameras, and that is of stolen cameras allegedly. So with that, you start to ask yourself, like, is that just a monetary, like a get back, like, oh, I'm taking everything, or was there a specific design behind taking the cameras? Because this is the deal. She took the cameras, but by all intents and purposes, she's saying she bought a new set of cameras, which it represents that there wasn't cameras before. So if you took some cameras from over on 125, but bought new cameras, where did those cameras go? Like, did you sell them? Were they destroyed? Like, what's the dynamic with those? Why are there replacements? Like, I feel like she tried to word salad it off like the new cameras, like they were in addition to the old ones. But I don't believe that's it at all. I don't believe that would make it where she's got like 8 angles covered and or 6 angles. You don't need all those angles. She needs 2 angles. So it makes you think that something happened to the initial 125 camera setup that was removed from the hill.
Sage Sleuth says Jody supposedly did a lot of things in a 30-minute window of time. Yeah. Are you away from the computer?
I am actually on the iPad.
Oh, do you want to? I can do it. Hold on. So Andy Stoner says, I remember also an exact match of truck going up for sale on the 17th of Car Guru that was being sold for $14,000, something like that, from Rogersville. And I typed back, I don't know if they saw it, but if you have a screenshot of that listing, that would be interesting to see. And then Killer said, could that young lady be Brianna? Just asking, following Andy. So that I guess that Fred is saying he saw. Could that be Brianna? So I wrote down if Andy knows Brianna, or if Jody Sue knew Brianna. She was kind of petite with dirty blonde to brownish hair. Yeah.
And so what you're getting from all of that, though, what you're getting is a lot of potential detail about a scenario where Andy wasn't driving the car he thinks he was driving. All that came from Fred Hill, but it's revolving around him being in the truck and not the car. So that's a lot of detail. Sandy blonde, petite, Andy's in the truck in front of her. Like that's a whole lot that puts him in the truck. Now, is Fred a liar? I mean,
Probably.
in terms of
More
all
than
of us
likely.
ever having told a lie, yeah, he's a liar. But did he lie about that? I don't know.
I hear he's I don't even remember. I mean, take this with a grain of salt because I don't actually even remember where I heard it from. But I heard that he is a thief as well.
There you
So
go.
Nicole says, could Jody Sue have gaslit him, trying to get him to remember things that didn't actually happen? For sure. I think
That's
for
what I
sure.
was
I feel
saying.
like
For
that's like
sure.
that's her MO. Like she uses her kids to do it, you know, to her in her absence or whatever. And also, I forgot to mention that I brought up in our phone call that Jody Sue is the only one with a motive.
Correct.
She is the only suspect who outwardly spoke hate and ill will on them.
Correct. And their children, not to mention.
And their children. More so the children.
More so the children. Correct.
And it was more like Candace was really dumb. She didn't really speak on Dawn. But she spoke a lot of hate on the kids. She also I caught her one time in her live saying that she doesn't like to compare abuse. But in Discord, she would tell me that Candace and Dawn's place, Candace had it easy compared to how she, the stuff that she would compare screams from across the hill. And Candace lived in such nicer conditions than what she lived. And, it's like, but you come to YouTube and you say, you don't like to compare? That's a fucking bullshit lie. So, and then Birdie says, remember, y'all, she already said she fed us lies. They can't even follow the effing breadcrumbs. What does that say? So, yeah, so she's admitted to misleading the public, intentionally misleading the public.
Correct.
You are a suspect in a missing child's case, and you have admitted to intentionally misleading the public. For what? For what?
For what good reason? Well, I'm guessing the good reason isn't to help the child, because you had all sorts of different opportunities to quote unquote save that child while she was still actively locatable on the hill. So you mean to tell me it's not until she goes missing from something that you could have stopped that you want to get involved?
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
And, I mean, I see how it's possible, but it makes zero fucking sense.
It's deceit thrives in confusion. To intentionally mislead would be to confuse people.
Correct.
Anyway, so Swamp Bee says if she's not directly involved, which I don't believe she is, she's the worst for muddying the waters in this case and making it about her, which, by the way, is the thing she hates about others.
Correct.
I agree, but I don't agree that she's not involved. I wholeheartedly believe that she knows exactly what happened. She might be able to confidently say that she doesn't know where Summer is at this moment, or she doesn't know what happened to Summer. But I think that if you asked her on a polygraph, how did Summer get gone and why, you might see something there.
I agree. And I think that there's something to the scenario where she's so adamantly in want, sometimes even relaying what looks like a need to be polygraphed. It's not every day, but she has. I believe that probably has to stem from a place where she knows they won't polygraph her.
Right. And it's kind of like her taunting them, kind of like
correct.
she knows they're not going to, or she knows they won't. So she's gonna, until her last breath, say
innocence in in a weak mind, like Jody's. She probably feels like if she expresses the want and need to take a polygraph, that would that might make someone assume that she's innocent, right? Oh, I'll take one right now. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's really kind of a statement. It's a split statement. I mean, I know people that are actually innocent have made that statement, but I think that's probably more a statement of someone that's guilty, right? Like, no, give me a poly. I'll take a polygraph right now.
I mean, that's the same thing essentially as somebody who's bald-faced lying to you saying, I put that on my kids.
Right.
Exactly. Same thing.
It's really no different, period.
So let's see. Andy Stoner said, and I remember her making comments like at 6:09, she's wondering if Scream came from left, and now an hour and a half already went by. All right. Yeah. I mean, she's just inconsistent. Even though she claims that her story hasn't changed since she wrote her statement to the police, we've seen it change
here verbally.
Change, go back, change again. Like, so maybe you're consistent in what you're telling police, and that's it. But she absolutely knows that what she has said on YouTube and to other people is not going to match what's in that statement.
Correct.
Now, and she will never show it.
The implicative part about saying something differently than what is actually in your written or recorded statement is this. In this day and age, if a judge elects to use any portion of social media for any one person's involved, he's got to allow social media for all persons involved. And in my opinion, because so many of these contradictive statements that you would use to, you would want to present these conflicting statements. A defense attorney certainly will want to present conflicting statements that would show that, a witness wasn't a good witness, right? So if she ever moves out of suspectum and moves into witnesshood, I don't believe she could be utilized as a prosecutorial asset based upon all the contradictive statements she's made. It's not like, now you have the freedom of speech, yes, but also with that freedom of speech comes the ideal that when you express your freedom of speech, when you live under a microscope, when you get called to the laboratory, they're about to bring all that up, right? We're gonna see if it boils down, and Jody and some of these other parties that, Candace, whomever, these people that have been on the internet messing around end up in a court facing trial. You will see YouTube stuff. I guarantee you. You're going to see it. It's going to be a part. They're going to use it to knock down things they say in the court. They'll be like, oh, you're just saying that here? Well, remember that time you said on a marathon panel, you remember you said this? Oh, yeah, I do. So then you shoot that down. That's.
So Crystal says, time to call the prosecutor's office. What do you think about that?
For today is pointing out the changes.
You're breaking up. Don't go off too deep because you're breaking up. Well, for me anyway.
Can you hear me?
Well, say a complete sentence so I can tell. No, well, to me, you still sound like a piano, but I don't know. Does chat? Yeah, I think you're good.
I don't even know. Yeah.
We were talking about, Crystal said, time to call the prosecutor's office.
Oh, no, I was just reading that as the full sentence you wanted. When you said read a full sentence, I read what just the. I don't recall what I was going to start into. But I think, we know that if you look at investigative tact and what investigators and police are looking for in suspect behavior after the change in appearance, change in behavior. You might quit a job. You might do lots of different things to sort of, essentially, like Fizzle said, if you're a party to a crime post-offense, you're going to make routine changes to make yourself comfortable in what remains, right? I mean, if you feel like any day they're coming to get you, you're going to do things. I mean, the fight, if you're involved after an offense, to try to keep it looking as normal as it did before. Once you make a change, that change glares and sticks out to investigators. So, in my opinion, with her wanting to leave her hill while the search was ramping up for summer, again, it starts to me, in my opinion, look like a mini geographical change. She just can't take the pressure of being on the hill with what's going on and with what she probably is fantasizing will take place. She doesn't want to be there. She wants to leave. Then we understand when he gets there, they don't let them leave, correct? For a while. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, she may have always planned on leaving, but just wasn't allowed to leave.
Hey, Benny, do you remember whenever we were on the phone and I mean, maybe you covered it before I came up, but you said that everybody on that hill and involved with that side has moved away.
Correct. Yeah.
And you even have Kenny, who died from an unexpected illness.
Correct. Every single person that was taking up residence over there has left. That is a ghost town over there. And I mean, whether or not that is indicative of involvement or just the way it's worked in their lives, it makes you question, right? Like, everybody's gone. It's the start.
And Jody Sue said that she would like to go, but it would make, and this is not verbatim, but this is just speaking to what she said, something that about if she left, then Ronnie Lawson, or they would question it and think that she's running. And that's not to say that Dawn and Candace didn't take off as well. Candace fantasized about leaving for a long time. She even played with the idea by making her location separate places on Facebook well before she ever actually left for good. Dawn was come and go, but Jody Sue left. She was evicted. Andy moved 3 hours away. Kenny died.
Right.
There's other Brianna died. I don't know if they know each other, but there's just a lot of death, surrounding this. And Jenny was telling me about another one last night, and I cannot for the life of me think of that person's name. I mean, Mary Sexton, yeah, but she was old. She was like 80 or something, Jenny said. But, whatever. It's just like people are dropping like flies around Jody Sue. People and animals are dropping like flies around Jody Sue. And then, of course, Boog went to the military. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there was a point in time where even Candace was, well, of course, she did do a short trip, allegedly, to South Carolina, North Carolina, one of the two. But then there was the talk of she had met a couple of gals on the internet, and they lived in North Dallas, far North Dallas. And so for a few weeks, she had this tentative plan to come to Texas. And I was like, listen, like, I knew what those two gals were up to. They were like, after having talked to them about the dynamics of having a Candace Wells come to your house, they elected to not take part. And I'm like, Candace, this isn't a party. Like, you're not coming to Dallas thinking you're going to party with me every day. Like, if you come to Dallas, I don't have a wish to even meet with you. Like, don't come here thinking you're going to come here and hang out and party every day, and that I'm going to enable that. Like, don't come here.
Yeah.
And she didn't go there. So, but we got vague reports of other things she was allegedly doing in the past months. So I don't know, but the routine changes are they're definitely something to look at right now with the geographical moves that have happened. Some of that, I think that you can some of those are a part of just time stretching out. People move and people die, but there were some pretty quick movements, like in August, right? So it happened mid-June, and by mid-August, the thing is dissolving over there. So it took the Wells situation, considerably longer than the Bernard situation, Brown situation, to dissolve. So I don't know what that means. I'm not inferring that it means anything specifically. I just identify that it happened. So there's just a lot to unpack, and I implore everyone to just look a little bit deeper. Like, we're all waiting for, WJHL or Don to get home or this or that. Like, there are many things you can still look at. You just gotta look a different deep, right? You're just looking somewhere different, and you're looking at things.
You're breaking up. Are you almost home?
That spot, no, I'm just leaving to go get Luca, and I'll probably be in that area for the next 10-15 minutes. So might just be as good a place as any to wrap up, probably. I mean, we touched on a lot of things, and I think that we've put together some ideals that hopefully other creators may take a look at and want to go a little deeper with themselves.
That's a good point, Roswell, baby. She said, it truly bothers me that all the adults left the Hill. Most people who have children or loved ones who are missing don't move away within the first year.
I agree, because it's the idea that if they come back and you're not there, then what, right? I've heard other situations where people didn't want to leave from where children, it's like if your kid runs, you misplace your kid in the store for a minute, you don't want to walk around. You want to be in the place that they were at when they last saw you, right? So it's that ideology.
Yeah, and that's like with Madeline McCann. She was taken on vacation, and the parents ultimately had to move back or go home. And I have always been I lean to the side that her parents were involved. Not a lot of people do, I don't think, but I do. And so that is an interesting point.
Yeah.
They ended up saying, they have the twins, then, they have to move on with their life. Basically, they have to keep living. And I get that.
For the other two kids.
You're right. But, as a parent, and especially in Dawn and Candace's situation, they didn't have to leave. They don't have careers that they have to get back to and other children to raise. Their children were taken. You're supposed to be making steps in the direction to get the other children back, which they neglected to do. And they left at free will without a guilty conscience, because as a mother, there's no way if there was nothing that I needed to get to, right? I had no career to go back home for or whatever. Like, they were already home.
Absolutely.
There is no reason why she should have been itching to get out of there.
Other than the need to run, to get comfortable again, right? Whatever your standard comfortability rate is, right? I mean, I guess if you're involved in something and the need to get away from that area so that your comfortability level returns is what it is, right? You're gonna run until you feel comfortable.
Yeah. Blues Clues, you can, if you go to my community wall, I'm trying to get away from email because I'm really bad about checking it. But if you go to my community wall and scroll down a couple, there's my Discord link. You can hit me up on Discord. But I wouldn't. My comfortability would be the farthest thing from my mind. Like, how can you ever be comfortable again, not having a single child you brought into this world? You have 4 children who are gone.
That's the innocent mind state, right? The other mind state, you know, and I mean, at the point where she was wanting to leave, it's just still, very deep into the situation with the court and the boys. So there was that real, like, you're vacating, you know what I mean? Like you're leaving, and you're gonna leave while the fight for your other 3 boys are still going on. Like, that was telling in itself. It's like I was telling her, like, man, nah, you need to hang around until all that shit is figured out. So
Right. I would try to have some sort of normalcy and routine to get by every day, because truthfully I would probably just want to die. But for her to, I don't know. I mean, it's just so strange. It's so strange. You would think you would want to stay there and see if, somebody comes back around lurking, or who knows? You never, I mean, I don't even know if Candace thinks that way. I don't know. It's just so strange, the behavior.
It is, and it's. I know that there's something to be said about tragedy. A lot of people will say, "Oh, well, people navigate tragedy differently than not everyone navigates it the same." But in
Right,
the
but
same
we're
respect,
human.
you actually do navigate it the same in terms of the grief process. There's only one way to grieve, and it's that process. Now, it doesn't mean you successfully navigated, or you navigated in the time your brother or sister did that experienced the same tragedy, but you do react to tragedy. We all react to tragedy basically the same way. So,
Right. We're not that complicated. I mean,
no, we're not. No, we think we are, but we're actually not. Right? That's
no.
how that will stretch over many human beings to fix the same issue, right? Whether it be physical, mental, whatever. But we're not that different. So the way you react to tragedy when you're innocent probably falls in line with a lot of other cases where you're innocent and your reaction is being monitored. And that guilty reaction, it also is going to be synonymous with a lot of other cases as well. Now, granted, with both dynamics of guilt and innocence, there will be those exceptions to the rule, right? Where, you've got a false confession, or you've got a bad prosecutorial deal, and it's a unlawful imprisonment, something like that, false conviction. So there are those exceptions to the rule, but most generically, and more oftentimes than not, everyone's going to fall in line, right? There's maybe some subset details that may be specific to yourself, but for the most part, we all kind of fall in line.
Yeah, well, I think where that's concerned, we all have like a standard baseline, and
For
with
sure.
different personalities and different upbringings, you might have different variations of the same process, but it's still
Correct.
the same process.
It's still the same process, right? We bleed the same, we heal the same. It's with the variations, the few and far between.
Yeah, unless
So,
you're like a psychopath.
Correct. So,
Which made me just want to Google how do psychopaths go through grief. That's what I'll be doing in a minute.
But and it's not to say that they don't. They just don't go through the grief of their victims, right? They don't feel the remorse or grief for their victims. But if someone
Well,
in their
not every
family is
psychopath
victimized,
makes victims, Benny. We probably encounter
That's very true.
psychopaths more often than we ever know, and a handful of them act out in violent and destructive ways.
Absolutely. I mean, from Dahmer, for instance, right? And I'm not talking about him because he's a hot topic, but Dahmer was a psychopath. He felt no remorse. He felt no grief for his victims. But his grandmother could die and he would be lost. He would be completely shattered and broken with the death of his grandmother. So he does feel the pain of death, but it's compartmentalized, right? Like,
And
if it
it
affects
probably
him,
it looks different. So I mean,
correct.
that baseline, that standard is probably it's just there. It's ingrained in probably almost all. I don't want to say all because I haven't met all people, nor am I qualified to render an opinion. But it's it looks different from person to person based on their life experiences, but it's just small deviations from the norm.
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you go left or right if you end up in the same place, right? And that's where you get the variation and the deviation. So,
and that's why it's so interesting, especially knowing that mothers get there at a slower pace to acceptance. It's so interesting. Dawn and Candace were there almost immediately.
Correct.
Outwardly, at least. Now, I have heard instances where Don was on the phone boo-hooing and expressing his emotions, but outwardly he's saying, got to give it to God, got to forgive, gonna see her in the resurrection and stuff like that. But outwardly, they were almost immediately to acceptance, which
agree.
Is so strange.
And then you had that question that behavioral panel, is a classic question, right? Like, Don, what do you think the punishment should be for somebody that's done this? And he has a hard time placing a real punishment on the person, because the ideal is that if someone has a hard time placing judgment on a situation that happened to them, the ideal is that they don't want to, they're culpable.
They're guilty, right?
Right.
And
they won't
it's like
go ahead.
There's like whenever somebody has a hard time saying what a punishment should be, or it seems to be lenient or not expected, what you would hear from an enraged father missing his daughter, you think that they're guilty because they're giving leniency, and it might not be that he's guilty, but maybe someone he cares for could be, and he's giving that leniency to that person.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, and there goes the deviation, I guess. So, or a potential deviation. So, it's very interesting, and I would implore everyone to start looking for, some of the more nonchalant nuances, right? Like, start trying to dig into things that aren't glaring at you. Try to make, and we're not forcing connections. We're not forcing possibilities. We're discussing theoreticals and what we know they have said verbally. We're not stretching any of their verbiage. We're using what they said and putting logic to it. And when you have an issue or confusing time placing logic in a confusing situation, 9 times out of 10, behavioral panel or Scott Johnson says, you're looking at deceit.
Steve Johnson. You know what? I would think that grief looks different with addicts too. If somebody is in their addiction with alcohol or illicit drugs,
but I think it could go either way. It could be way more magnified, or they could look like desensitized to it, depending, right?
Like
But I
Dawn,
do agree.
probably.
There
He's
would be
relying on that escape, that eventual escape, because it wasn't every day. He was finding convenient spaces and time to escape, and then come back whenever he's feeling like he can cope.
Right. Or when he's shamed back, or when he runs out of money.
Right.
Right. And I think some of it has to do with running out of money. Like he'll run out of money and he's just forced to come back. So it is very strange nuances that have occurred and that continue to occur. But the change in routine, I ask everyone to pay attention to it, because you're seeing changes in routines right now with JSB allowing people to come on the panel, even if that never happens again. It was a change in routine, and so something prefaced that change. So, and then it goes right. It's up and running then. So, I would say that although we probably could gain some useful information from Jody Sue answering questions on the fly like she did the other night, I think there's that tipping point where it could be useful and then it would be unuseful. And so I don't, be careful what you ask for, right?
So this is an interesting comment. I know you're getting ready to go, but Miss Christine said, Allie told JLR the kids used to play at our house the summer before Summer died. She said that in November 2021.
Yeah, we need to look at that for sure. That needs to be...
especially with people saying Hunter will never be the same.
Right. And Tiffany raised an interesting point that I had never actually thought about. It is a nuance. And what she raised to me privately was, have you ever thought about the possibility that when H said he read the text and it said that it's done, that maybe that was the phone auto-correcting, and that really the message could have been, it's Don, D-O-N. Now, deduce from there what you want. Was it
that's
Don
an interesting point. I've never thought about that.
That's a beautiful nuance that Tiffany raised, and giving credit to Tiffany Marie. I agree. It could be.
But why would it be screenshot and saved?
Don't know. I mean, we know all the time, people that are involved with, getting receipts or trying to prove things on the internet. I've seen many people take syntax error or typographical error and screenshot it and use it to their advantage. So could have been, I'm just unbiasedly offering real estate in what it may or could or could not be. Could be many things, but I looking at it in the realm of nuance like we are today. I mean, if you heard that in a court and they said, oh yeah, no, the phone actually auto-corrected and it was actually saying it's Don, you wouldn't be surprised.
Well, the argument to that, I would say, would be, would not Candace's phone be accustomed to typing D-O-N? Because let me tell you what.
I don't think so. I think it'd be accustomed to typing Donnie, to be completely honest, or baby.
That's true. Baby. That's true. That's a good point too. But in this time that I've been following this case, anytime I type don't, my phone autocorrects don't to Dawn. And
there you go. See now, I mean, it's a scenario where maybe some of the context allegedly or theoretically could be gone, and that it could have been Don texting, saying it's done, right? I mean, H is only human, so he is capable of making a mistake. And just because he said something is a particular way, and it seems to fit, I hate the word, but if it fits a narrative you want to run with, well, then yeah, it's going to say it's done. But
I don't think he would necessarily be looking at that and fitting a narrative. I think he would see a message.
I'm not talking about H in a narrative at all. I'm saying other people taking what H said and not allowing
and turning it to their narrative.
Correct. Not allowing it to be something different, or maybe H made a mistake. Several texts and mixed up who they were from. Even like there is a generic unbiased that you have to lend to the situation. You have to lend that to
That's
it.
true. He did say he was like dyslexic or something.
Correct. So may have put a different caller on the wrong text, right? I mean, now in terms of confidence, yes, in this forum, when you say something and you don't want to be demolished, like you just run. If that's what you said, you stand on it. Not run with it, that's the wrong word, but if you stand on it, you believe it to be, then yeah, you said it, you stand on it. And that could be also a dynamic, right? He may actually still believe that that's actually what he saw. It may actually be what he saw, right? You've got to be able to look at it unbiasedly, because when you stick to a narrative or an agenda, you're going to miss out. You're going to miss what the other side has to offer in terms of deductive information. And of course, deductive information is always hopefully logical speculation, logical, theorization. So
Yeah, I mean, it's just very frustrating that we deduce, we spitball, we kick the can, we theorize, and then it comes up with like we have no answers. We know
correct.
nothing. It's like, fuck.
But what you do know are some of the things that over time still don't change and remain synonymous, and those are the changes in routine and the numbers of routine changes that we've laid out for all of you today.
Yeah.
Any one of those routine changes, if you dig deeper and you're applying logical deduction to it, there may be a wealth of information to uncover from these things still available, right?
Yeah,
So
we can identify these changes and these things that are consistent, and we can theorize what they may mean, but we don't know. We just know that they exist.
But you're just applying, you're applying your logic and the way you think you understand human behavior, along with great resources in the community and some of these other channels like Todd Grande, Mrs. Mosette. There are some really hard-hitting channels that can really help you get down to the deduction you feel where you're at with it. Now, I think a lot of us are here today on my channel, mine and Fizzle's channel, because we hold some of the same beliefs. You'll go other places and people corral together because they have different beliefs than we do, and people with with like-minded beliefs tend to coagulate in the same places. That's human nature. So
I don't think so, Diana.
What's that? What she say? I can't see it.
She says, I think Don would have broke by now, being locked up all this time and told everything. He's had a long time to think. I think I think he suspects things but doesn't know for sure. I don't think that. So Don is a career criminal. He has taken residence in a correctional facility many times throughout his life, and to be gone for the amount of time that he has been, I really don't think so. I really don't.
Well, and there's also the dynamic, maybe some people don't understand, but when you're in confinement, not knowing what politics Don is involved with, I'm pretty sure Don's involved in jailhouse politics, whether it be, trading and or he's got a jailhouse hustle, right? So his jailhouse hustle puts him in the politics, right? Now the politics, what they state is, when you get pulled away from the unit, now a lot of people understand that Don is also the subject of his daughter's disappearance. So there is a little leeway granted to Don, I'm guessing, for when Don gets pulled from the unit. But if you're involved in politics in the jail and you get pulled from the unit, when you come back, those people automatically, they're going to automatically question you, thinking that you've been pulled away to talk about politics in the jail and not your case. So there's just a lot of dynamics. And so I say all that to say that Don is living in a no snitching environment. So, I just feel like if Don was going to say something, it was not going to be while he was in jail. It's going to be when he's on the outs. If he even has anything to offer in the way of information about his daughter's disappearance. That's my opinion, knowing the dynamics. I just feel like he probably doesn't want to be questioned. Like, he doesn't really want inmates in there to be in his business. So, when he's pulled away, if he's pulled away, he may be pulled away during rec times or, times when it's less obvious that he's being pulled away. And in my opinion, Don doesn't want a lot of the inmates in there questioning what he's talking about to the police while he's pulled away. So, it may be even a scenario where Don is like, man, look, I don't got nothing to say. While I'm locked up, man, I ain't got shit to say. I'll talk when I get out, though. I mean, he could just invoke his Fifth Amendment and not say anything, period. Like, and
he doesn't have to answer any questions about this right now while serving a sentence for a DUI.
Not at all. He doesn't even have to answer it when he's on the street, still a suspect. It's his right to invoke his Fifth Amendment. So with all of those
Diana says that makes sense.
Light, and now check this out. Let's say them folks in there think, it's part of the reason he's in PC, which is protective custody. I'm guessing is to protect him from the element, the Gen Pop element that may feel like he has something to do with his own daughter's disappearance. They'll run court and trial and execution right in the unit. And they'll fuck around and get poked up just because of what somebody thinks. So they really got to protect Don in that scenario because he's got the politics he could get involved in. And people have bias based on what they think Don's involvement is.
And it's not like he's away like in Nashville or something. He's there locally with people he'll likely see on the outside too. So
correct. Absolutely. Now, if he was moved to a different jail, he wouldn't have that dual dynamic and getting pulled and questioned and shit. But that ain't the case. So, I'm guessing they're being real careful with him because, first of all, they don't want nobody to hurt his ass behind what they think he may have done.
Yeah, he's a liability. You're breaking up really bad.
I guess to wrap it up, we've been here over 2 hours.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll wrap it up then. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for all of your super chats and memberships. And remember that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. And never be afraid to forgive as much as you can and apologize as much as you should. Okay, bye. Thanks, everybody.